So we talked about skills. A lot of the resources that I want to get to here that every man must develop are, of course, going to tie into some of the skills that I mentioned earlier. So resources are things that you acquire, that you have in possession. Skills are, they're non-tangible, right? It's just something you have in you. Like you have a network, you have people that respond to you. You know how to make money, you know how to acquire food, you know how to solve problems. Skills are different from resources. Resources are different from skills. The next batch that I want to talk to you guys about are the actual resource component, the things that you must acquire. We already talked about money and wealth, so I'm not going to beat on that too much. But that is obviously meaningful for reasons I've already covered. Status. So what is status? Status is having the ability to have a conversation and have people listen to you, maybe like I am right now. Like we do on the other shows that we host. When I have an in real life event and guys put money where their mouth is and they buy a plane ticket and they fly out and they meet in a group and we have a conversation and there's chopping up back and forth and there's a leadership component. Status is something that you acquire. Status isn't so much a physical thing that you can touch, but it's something that, you have status if you are strong and masculine. We can use that as a very simple example. You walk into a room and people notice you. Men look at you and they're like, oh, you could be a threat. Or, oh, I want to know what that guy's about. I want to see what his network looks like. I want to see what his skills are. Who is that guy? And why does he walk in with so much confidence? And the same thing with chicks too. Like women will see a guy when he walks in a room and they'll notice him when there's status. You can display status with your clothing, with your style. The appearance of power is something that you can certainly portray, that is shown with status. Status is also something that can be demonstrated, as a point of influence. Having a competent and useful social media presence, is hokey as that might sound to some people. If you have a verified badge and a large following on social media, that conveys a level of status, because people that don't have status are insignificant. They're invisible. They don't have the following. That's all that following is on social media. Following count is just an indication of status. I might have more status than other men. There's lots of men out there that have more status than me. But status can be measured in such a way. Prestige is another really important one too that you have to acquire. This is a resource that goes back in time. Do I have the book up? No, I don't have the appearance of power here, but prestige is something that is closely related to status, networking, a lot of these other things where omnipotence, if I can put it that way. If you guys know what omnipotence means, it's, years ago when I was doing like loads and loads of coaching calls, when I first got started, I was talking to this guy and he had studied everything. He looked me up on LinkedIn, looked at my website and my debt settlement business, read the Toronto Star business section, the section where I was on the front page. And he's like, you're omnipotent in the way that you've sort of accomplished boom, 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 sort of thing like that. Prestige is, you don't really know it until other people recognize it and point to it, if I can put it that way. Like you don't just go, oh, I'm prestigious or something. Like, sure, you can go out and lease a Bentley and say that you're prestigious, sort of thing. But I think the guy that drives an average car, that people recognize his prestige outside of his car or the watch that he might have on his wrist. Like that's one reason why a lot of people, guys especially, will wear watches so they can signal, prestige on their wrist. You'll notice I almost never wear a watch. I think I have 2 or 3 watches. The most expensive one I have is one that a old business partner gave me years ago as a Tag Heuer. That's one way that you can acquire resources and demonstrate that. The other way too, and it's very difficult. People don't know. You could have a guy walking down the street that could have $1 billion in Bitcoin on his ledger, and you wouldn't even know, right? But the way that he carries himself and the way that he's networked and the way that he's sort of like lived through his life, especially the older you get, you can kind of see it on guys. It's almost like you can sniff it out. I think women are better at it than what men are. I think women, especially in real life, have the ability to sniff out prestige better than guys can. That's why you don't generally need to signal that much to women. Like they kind of have a way of sizing you up, if you know what I mean. Talked about status, prestige, network, assets. Assets are very straightforward. I mean, assets don't have to be a house. They don't have to be your cars. They don't have to be your clothing. They don't have to be your jewelry. They don't have to be watches. Assets can be a number of things. You can be worth 9 figures. You know, one of the stats that I saw the other day, I was watching his podcast. This guy was talking about exotic car owners. I think his name's Ed Boleyn, Vinwiki or something like that. And when he was selling Lamborghinis and McLarens and stuff like that, he was saying the vast majority of guys, they're basically broke. 80% of them can barely afford what they're driving. And then the podcast host that was talking to him said something along the lines of, yeah, you know, he put it up on the screen and it's like the vast majority of multimillionaires out there, like guys that are worth 7 or 8 figures, you know, for example, plus, don't even drive expensive cars or exotic cars. They drive Toyotas, Hondas, and stuff like that. And the argument behind that is like the vast majority of those guys are actually quite a bit older. They're probably over 60. Like there's more millionaires over 60, obviously, than there are under 30. Just because the older you get, you kind of acquire more shit, but they don't signal it overtly out in public. For a lot of them, it's an unknown thing. And I'm more impressed by a 30-year-old that paid cash for their Lambo than the 30-year-old that has like 4 exotics and they're all leased to the hilts, right? Or they're financed at 8% or some shit like that. And they put like 10 grand down on each car, but they're financing $1,500 a month because they've got some cash flow. The acquisition of assets creates leverage is what it boils down to, right? Like you can leverage all these things. You can sell them, you can borrow against them. One of the things people don't really understand about Bitcoin as an asset class is as time goes on and more money flows into the market capitalization of it, it becomes a more leverageable asset. You see Saylor talk about this often where he calls it like digital real estate. And I think even to this day, I think for the most part, you can borrow against 50% at a pretty favorable rate of the value of Bitcoin today. So if Bitcoin's worth $100,000, let's say you can borrow $50,000 against a Bitcoin that you hold, you just leverage against it sort of thing. And that's almost invisible. You don't see that. So not all assets are always tangible in your hand that you can touch. All right, guys, I really hope that you enjoyed that clip. If you want to check out the full-length podcast episode, you can find that right over here. Also, make sure you visit my website over here where you'll find my supplements, the opportunity to book me privately one-on-one for coaching, and most importantly, my new School of Unplugging, which you'll find on the courses tab. Newer to the channel, hit subscribe.